Welcome back to Rice Public Radio. Today we've got a really fascinating article for you guys. It's an article by the Washington Post, and the title of this article says, "The average millennial has a net worth of $8,000. That's far less than previous generations." So I'm going to read this article for you guys. It's pretty short, and once I'm done reading, I'll share my thoughts and jump into it. Millennials are doing far worse financially than generations before them, with student loans, rising rents, and higher healthcare costs pushing the average net worth below $8,000, a new study shows. The net worth of Americans aged 18 to 35 has dropped 34% since 1996, according to research released Thursday by Deloitte, the accounting and professional services giant. This demographic is paying more for education and such basics as food and transportation, while incomes have largely flatlined. The vast majority of consumers are under tremendous financial pressure, said Casey M. Loba, Deloitte's chief retail innovation officer and lead author of the study. That is basically true for low-income Americans and millennials. The growing gap between the nation's wealthiest residents and everyone else, he said, is affecting the way consumers spend. Education expenses have climbed 65% in the past decade. Food costs have jumped 26%, healthcare is up 21%, housing jumped 16%, and transportation rose 11%. And there are now expenses that most consumers didn't have to account for 20 years ago, including smartphones and data plans. Today's 20 and 30-somethings spend about 17% of their incomes on education, healthcare, and rent, compared with 12% a decade ago, the study found. Discretionary spending, which includes dining out, alcohol, and furniture, has remained largely flat at about 11% of total income. Only 20% of consumers were meaningfully better off in 2017 than they were in 2007, with precious little income left to spend on discretionary retail, the study found. The findings, researchers say, debunk many conventional wisdoms about the new age consumer. Millennials, they contend, are putting off home buying and marriage not because they want to, but because rising costs are making it difficult for them to afford down payments and weddings. The narrative out there is that millennials are ruining everything, from breakfast cereal to weddings. But what matters to consumers today isn't much different than it was 50 years ago, Loba said. Generally speaking, there have not been dramatic changes in how consumers spend their money. Overall, U.S. retail spending has grown about 13% since 2005 to roughly $3 trillion a year. But researchers say much of that growth is tied to population growth, not consumers spending more. In the past decade, the nation's highest earners, households making $100,000 or more, watched their incomes rise 1,305% more than those in households making less than $50,000 a year. There's one area, though, where consumers are spending less than they once did: clothing. Shoppers are spending half as much on apparel as they did a decade ago, even as they buy more items, the study found. Loba said the reasons for that shift are both economic and cultural. Retailers are churning out cheaper clothing and selling it at lower prices as they try to compete with fashion chains like H&M and Zara. At the same time, Americans are buying more casual and athletic wear, which tends to be cheaper than business suits and formal wear. I really like this article because it proves what us millennials have known for so long, that times are rough and we're struggling out here. And it gives us numbers to back that up. It's pretty damning, actually, because if you look, just the second paragraph, it says net worth of Americans 18 to 35 has dropped 34% since 1996. 34%. That is huge. So what we own and, or our debt is just, we've either owned less or our debt's gone way up. It's really damning. I think even more terrible is it says education expenses has climbed 65% in the past decade. 65% in 10 years is a mammoth increase. Food costs up 26%, healthcare up 21%, housing jumped 16%, transportation up 11%. Look, we're paying much more
for the same things. We're paying more for the basic goods and services than we've ever been. And wages have remained stagnant for the past, 30, 40 years, at least, since the 1970s. So we're feeling the crunch. Millennials are feeling the crunch. Well, working Americans in general, but for us millennials, it's not looking good. And think about it. If your wages have flatlined, you're paying more for just basic stuff, you're going to feel the pinch. You're going to feel the squeeze. It also says today's 20 to 30 somethings spend 17% of their incomes on, education, healthcare, and rent compared to 12% a decade ago. So yeah, just to show that we're paying much more for basic stuff. Only 20% of consumers are meaningfully better off in 2017 than they were in 2007. The financial collapse of 2008 had something to do with it, but only 20% of consumers were better off. So obviously everyone's been struggling post financial collapse. It's hard to crawl out of a hole. If you lose a lot of people lost their house, a lot of people lost their job. There was so much loss and suffering from that financial crisis that people are still crawling out of that hole. And I like how it says the findings, researchers say, debunk many conventional wisdoms about the new age consumer and millennials. You probably have heard or seen those ads on TV or like on YouTube where people just make fun of millennials. And I guess it's the popular thing to do. People are saying millennials killed, there's articles saying that millennials killed the restaurant industry. Millennials are killing, the car industry. Millennials aren't having kids. They're not having relationships, yada, yada. They're not buying houses. Well, just take a look at this article. We're paying more and more for just basic things while wages have flatlined. It's difficult to start a family if you're just making minimum wage and you're paying all your money is going to rent or transportation or education. It's difficult to just take a couple hours off in your day to go out to a nice restaurant because you don't have that money. You don't have that financial security to do that. To maybe you might buy a used car instead of a new car. You might cut out a vacation. You might take up a second job. When you have all these rising costs without proportional increases of wages and salaries, you're gonna cut off something. It's so funny. People always dunk on millennials for being entitled, like, we want the entire world given to us. Like, oh, millennials love socialism. They love free stuff. Oh, they're so entitled. And yet people always say, oh, millennials are lazy. They have a poor work ethic. They don't know anything. Well, look at this data. We're not entitled. We've grown up in a time post-financial collapse where we're not making as much money. Costs of everything are rising. And you're saying that we're entitled and we're lazy? Just look at the economy. That's enough proof. Look at these numbers. That's enough proof that entire myth of the lazy millennial or the entitled millennial is fucking bullshit. I mean, just a couple years ago, I think there was a really popular avocado toast post. I think originated in Facebook or something. Where here, let's look that up. Oh, here we go. This is from knowyourmeme.com. On May 15th, 2017, Australian website ran an article recapping a story where millionaire property mogul Tim Gurner said, when I was trying to buy my first house, I wasn't buying smashed avocado for $19 and 4 coffees at $4 each. Gurner was attempting to make the point that millennials spend too lavishly to afford a home, while older generations saved money in order to invest in a home. However, the quote about avocado became subject of derision as it became the focus of a dialogue around Gurner's comments. Yeah, so that avocado meme story took off because a lot of apparently this guy was just given a silver spoon when he was born, and some other people made it actually a legit calculations about how much avocado toast you would have to eat, which is like some astronomical number. So it just made this fucking Gurner dude like a fucking douchebag and a moron. But anyway, it's back on topic. Just old people shitting on young old people shitting on young people. I mean, I guess that's every generation does that, but what's so annoying is we have stats right here. And not only this, you can look at research regarding, education costs. You can look at research regarding income inequality, flatlining wages versus inflation versus production. And you can see that our economy is not in good shape. I mean, Fox News or some shit might say like, oh, the Trump economy is so great. Like, oh, unemployment's low, stock market is high, blah, 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 blah. Dude, it's only doing well for the rich. For working class people and millennials, it's not improving. And, if you just think about where did the money go, you're seeing that the rich are doing very well. And you're seeing that working class folks aren't seeing a proportional increase in their income. So obviously the rich are getting richer and richer, and the poor are getting, poorer and poorer. 3 people own as much as the bottom half of Americans. 40% of Americans can't afford an emergency, $400 or more. This is proof that our economy is bad. So, boomers and old people dunking on millennials, they're just disillusioned, If you just look back in like the 50s or the 60s or the 70s, you can have one parent work and support the entire family. You can buy a house, the mom can be a stay-at-home mother or whatever, and they would have a pretty decent life. Back in the day, like in the pre-1950s, 50s, 60s, if you had a bachelor's degree, you were guaranteed a good, stable job with a pension, stability and security. But look at us millennials now. Everyone basically needs a bachelor's. Like, there's people who say like, oh, you don't need a bachelor's to get a good, job, especially in the trades. But if you want access to higher paying jobs, a bachelor's is still the way to go. I mean, I guess in terms of value, because, of the cost, it's still hard for people to afford college, but you still need it because a bachelor's degree functionally serves as a barrier to the access of higher paying jobs. So, and you saw that in the article, we're spending 65%. I mean, it's 65% more than it was, a decade ago or something. You're saying education expenses have climbed 65% in the past decade. So yeah, there we go. Gosh, it's like, boomers are calling millennials entitled. Well, aren't they privileged or entitled for dunking on millennials when they lived in the time where the U.S. economy was super good from the late 40s to the 70s. That was the golden age of the U.S. economy. It's just so frustrating when people dunk on young people. I mean, yeah, there's some things that I don't like about my generation, millennials, but there's no denying that what's going on in our economy today is really affecting the way we live, our lifestyles. I don't know. I mean, that's why we need someone like Bernie Sanders. We need someone with progressive policies. We need someone like with big, bold vision, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, so we can make those systemic changes happen in order to increase the quality of life for all Americans, for millennials, working class folks. That's why us millennials, we need to be engaged in the political process, and learning more about politics and learning more about who to support. We have to reverse this downward spiral of worsening economic outcomes. That's really what we have to do.